When my packages kept vanishing from my porch, I thought the delivery company was to blame until my neighbor's smug smile and a trail of glitter revealed everything she'd done. Let me start from beginning. The first time a package disappeared, I didn't think much of it. It was a simple book order, something I'd been waiting on for a quiet weekend read. When the tracking showed it as delivered, yet my porch stood empty, I assumed it was a courier error. It happens, I told myself maybe it got left at the wrong door or scanned too early. But when the second package vanished only a few days later, I began to feel that creeping unease that something wasn't quite right. At first, it was just small things, nothing expensive, nothing worth causing a scene over. A kitchen gadget, a box of stationery, a candle set I'd bought for my sister's birthday. But every time I expected that brown cardboard box, it was nowhere to be found. The only consistent thing was the delivered status that mocked me on my phone. It was early autumn when I started to notice a pattern. The disappearances happened mostly in the afternoon, between 3 and 5 o'clock, the same hours I worked remotely from my upstairs office, headphones in, unaware of whatever was happening at my front door. My neighborhood wasn't unsafe. In fact, it was one of those quiet, tree-lined suburban areas governed by an overly enthusiastic HOA. Lawns trimmed to exact lengths, mailboxes matching in color, and security patrols that seemed more decorative than functional. The HOA president, her name was Karen, and I mean that in every sense, had lived next door since I'd moved in 2 years earlier. She was the kind of neighbor who noticed if your trash bins were left out 10 minutes too long or if your grass dared to grow an inch past regulation height. She'd once slipped a note into my mailbox reminding me that my front porch decor didn't meet community standards. That decor had been a small welcome mat that said, "Probably watching Netflix." Apparently, humor wasn't HOA-approved. Still, I tried to be civil. We waved politely when we happened to be outside at the same time, but I always got the sense that she was watching. Not just in a neighborly way, more like she was keeping tabs, cataloging every small thing I did that might lower property values. It wasn't until mid-October that I began to suspect her. That day, I was expecting a medium-sized box containing a few skincare products, nothing flashy, but the tracking number said it had arrived around 3:45 p.m. when I opened the front door at 5. The porch was empty, again, but this time, I noticed something odd. A faint smear of dirt near the steps, like a shoe scuff. And on the edge of the welcome mat, just barely visible, was the faintest glint of something metallic. A broken piece of what looked like cheap jewelry, maybe from a bracelet or a charm. I pocketed it without thinking and stepped outside. That's when I saw her. Karen was in her driveway, fussing with her garbage cans. She gave me a look that was somewhere between pity and smug satisfaction. I remember the way her lips twitched, almost as if she was holding back a smile. Something about it sent a shiver through me. When she turned to go back inside, I noticed something that made my pulse quicken. On her porch, barely hidden behind a decorative bush, was a stack of boxes. Brown, taped, and identical to the kind that had been disappearing from mine. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe they were hers, maybe she ordered a lot of things. But as I walked back to my front door, the small piece of jewelry in my pocket caught the light again. It looked oddly familiar. Later that night, I realized why Karen had been wearing a bracelet just like it at the last HOA meeting. I couldn't shake the thought. What if she'd been taking them? The idea seemed ridiculous at first. Why would someone like Karen, retired, affluent, always dressed in those crisp pastel cardigans, bother stealing random deliveries? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. She had the perfect setup, a house directly next to mine, always home during the day, always watching. And if she was the one behind it, she'd have every excuse to be near my property under the guise of keeping an eye on the neighborhood. Over the next week, I decided to test it. I ordered a few small packages, nothing valuable, but enough to see what would happen. I scheduled the deliveries at different times, tracked them obsessively, and even set my phone to alert me the moment the status changed to delivered. And every single time, within an hour, the package vanished. It was like clockwork. That's when I realized this wasn't bad luck or coincidence. Someone was taking them. And everything in me told me it was her. I set up a small indoor camera facing the window that overlooked the porch. It wasn't perfect, but it was discreet enough not to be noticed. The first few days, it caught nothing. The deliveries either arrived when I was home or didn't arrive at all. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I finally got a hit. The motion alert popped up on my phone while I was in a virtual meeting. When I reviewed the footage that night, my suspicions solidified into certainty. The grainy video showed a figure approaching my porch, short, blonde, wearing a pink sweater and holding a phone in one hand. The timestamp matched the moment my package disappeared. Even with the low resolution, I knew who it was: Karen. The next morning, I confronted the HOA about it, not directly naming her at first, just expressing concern about package thefts in the area. The board assured me they'd send out a community-wide reminder about porch security, but I knew better. The reminder went out the next day, written in Karen's usual passive-aggressive tone, "Signed, your HOA president." The irony burned. Still, I kept quiet. If she was bold enough to steal from me in broad daylight, I needed more than a blurry video. I needed proof she couldn't deny. That single quotes s when the idea of the trap started forming. I spent nights researching DIY glitter bombs, motion-activated cameras, and safe but spectacular ways to expose a thief. The plan wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. About finally catching her in the act, undeniable non-record. I ordered the materials under a different address, picking them up myself from the post office to avoid any more disappearances. My heart raced with every step of the plan. By the end of that week, the trap was ready. A decoy box, perfectly sealed, carefully labeled, and placed exactly where all the others had vanished from. Inside was a pressurized glitter mechanism, safe, harmless, but impossible to ignore once triggered. A small hidden camera, camouflaged among my porch plants, pointed straight at it. Then I waited. The air that day was unnaturally still, like the world knew something was about to happen. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, and every creak of the house made my pulse jump. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for the motion alert that would tell me she'd taken the bait. Hours passed. Nothing. I began to wonder if maybe she'd grown suspicious. Maybe she knew I was onto her. Maybe she'd stopped. And then, just as I started to relax, the alert came through, a single notification. Motion detected, front porch. When I opened the live feed, I saw her, Karen, standing on my porch, smiling. Her hand reached for the decoy box. And that's when everything changed. The moment Karen's hand touched the decoy box, time seemed to slow. Through the live feed on my phone, I watched the scene unfold in eerie silence. The faint hum of my computer fan was the only sound in my room as I stared at the screen, heart pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in my ears. She looked around once, scanning the quiet cul-de-sac, her eyes darting between the trimmed hedges and the motionless street. Then, with the ease of someone who'd done it many times before, she bent down, lifted the package, and began to turn away. That single, smooth movement confirmed everything I had suspected for months. She'd stolen from me before. She was doing it again. And then it happened. A sudden burst of light exploded across the feed. A shimmering storm of color, fine as dust and bright as confetti, erupted from the box in her hands. For a moment, the camera struggled to adjust to the chaos. Gold, blue, and magenta glitter bursting outward in a cloud that caught the sunlight just enough to sparkle like magic. Karen stumbled backward, waving her hands in shock, coated instantly from head to toe in the metallic mess. Her pastel cardigan, once spotless and prim, transformed into a dazzling display of humiliation. The live feed trembled slightly as the glitter cloud slowly drifted to the ground, carried by a lazy afternoon breeze. I couldn't hear her, but I could imagine the gasp, the outrage, the disbelief. The moment she realized the glitter wasn't going anywhere, it clung to everything: her hair, her clothes, her face. She tried brushing it off, but it stuck stubbornly to her skin, sparkling brighter with every movement. She dropped the ruined box and stormed off, leaving a trail of glittery footprints along my walkway. For a brief, shining moment, I just sat there stunned, breathless, half disbelieving that it had worked so perfectly. Months of frustration, stolen packages, and silent resentment had all led to that one burst of color. But as the shock faded, another feeling crept in. Anticipation. Because the glitter bomb wasn't the only part of the trap. The camera had captured everything in perfect, high-definition clarity. The footage was beautiful. Corinne's expression, the explosion of color, the unmistakable moment of theft. It was all there, evidence. I backed up the video to multiple drives, uploaded copies to the cloud, and timestamped everything. If she tried to deny it, I'd have proof that even the HOA couldn't ignore. Still, I hesitated to release it immediately. I wanted to see what she'd do first, how she'd react, whether she'd try to cover it up or worse, retaliate. That night, the neighborhood group chat buzzed with activity. Someone mentioned seeing a strange glitter mess near my driveway. Another joked about a unicorn explosion. I said nothing. I watched as speculation grew. Kids, pranksters, maybe even delivery errors. But not once did anyone mention Corinne's name. Not yet. The next morning, though, everything changed. Corinne was furious. I saw her outside at 7 a.m., furiously scrubbing her driveway, her porch, even her car door handles. The glitter had somehow made its way everywhere, tiny, stubborn flecks that refused to disappear no matter how hard she scrubbed. The sunlight that morning made it worse, catching every particle and turning her entire property into a sparkling scene of poetic justice. I watched quietly from my upstairs window as she worked. The more she cleaned, the angrier she became. At one point, she stopped and glared straight at my house, her expression tight and venomous. It was clear she suspected me, but she had no proof. Not yet. By noon, I received an email from the HOA. The subject line read, "Urgent, community cleanliness violation." My stomach sank even before I opened it. The message accused me of causing environmental disruption through the release of glitter materials that had allegedly contaminated neighboring properties. It demanded that I clean the area immediately and refrain from conducting unsanctioned experiments. The signature at the bottom. Corinne, of course, in her trademark cursive font. I almost laughed. She had the audacity to accuse me of violating HOA rules after being caught red-handed stealing from my porch. It was too perfect, but rather than respond, I decided to escalate quietly. That afternoon, I compiled the footage, trimming it to just the right moments. The approach, the theft, the explosion. I overlaid the timestamp and even zoomed in on the moment her face turned from smug to horrified. Then, with the care of someone preparing a masterpiece, I uploaded the file to the community Facebook group under a simple caption, "For those wondering about the glitter." The post went live at 3:17 p.m. By 3:30, my phone was lighting up nonstop. Reactions, comments, shares. It spread like wildfire. Neighbors who had been polite but distant for years suddenly had plenty to say. Shocked emojis, messages of support, and more than a few jokes about karma and sparkly justice. One neighbor admitted that their packages had been disappearing too. Another said they'd seen Corinne lingering near driveways more than once. By 4 o'clock, the HOA's online comments section was in chaos. Half the board tried to delete the thread. The other half argued it was public evidence. Corinne herself had yet to respond, but that silence only fueled the gossip. And then, late that evening, she finally broke it. She sent a neighborhood-wide email claiming the video was doctored, that it was defamation, and that she planned to take legal action, but it was too late. The footage had already been shared beyond the HOA chat. A few neighbors even re-uploaded it to YouTube, where it began racking up views. The next few days were surreal. Corinne avoided me entirely. Her once constant yard patrols stopped. The pristine flower beds she used to tend fell slightly out of order. She even skipped the next HOA meeting of first since I'd moved in, but the glitter didn't go away. It clung to her driveway for weeks, a permanent reminder of the moment she got caught. Even after rainstorms, you could still see faint specks glimmering in the cracks between the concrete slabs. Kids in the neighborhood started calling her house the Sparkle Zone. For a while, I thought it was over. Packages started arriving safely again. The HOA grew quieter. Neighbors smiled when they passed me. I felt a strange mix of relief and triumph. The balance had been restored. But justice, as it turns out, has a way of igniting grudges. One night, about 3 weeks after the glitter incident, I was sitting in my living room when I heard a dull thud outside. At first, I thought it was wind or maybe a raccoon knocking something over. But then came another sound, a soft scrape. A shadow moved past the frosted glass of my front door. I froze. For a long moment. There was silence. Then, a faint metallic clink like someone twisting open a latch. I crept toward the window, peering through the blinds, just enough to see. There she was, Karen, in the middle of the night. Standing at my porch again, but this time, she wasn't stealing. She was leaving something. A small box. Perfectly wrapped. And then she walked away. When she was gone, I opened the door slowly, hard pounding. The box sat there under the porch light, wrapped in shiny silver paper that shimmered faintly, glitter still embedded in the fibers. There was a small note on top, written in her neat handwriting. No return address. No explanation. Just 2 words. Your turn. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. I didn't touch it. I didn't bring it inside. Whatever this was, I wasn't going to be caught off guard. The next morning, the HOA received another mysterious email, anonymous and signed, but addressed to everyone. It contained screenshots of private messages from the community chat. Messages discussing the video, my name, my address. Speculation about whether I'd set up Karen unfairly. Someone was trying to turn the neighborhood against me. And I had a feeling I knew exactly who. The glitter may have exposed her once, but now, it seemed, the real work was about to begin. The silver box sat untouched on my porch for nearly 2 hours before I decided what to do with it. Every instinct told me not to open it, but curiosity has a way of whispering louder than reason. I had cameras rolling from 3 angles, front, side, and one from my upstairs window. If this was another one of Karen's schemes, I wanted every second documented. The box looked harmless enough, neat corners, shiny ribbon. No suspicious sounds were ticking, but there was something unnerving about its perfection, to careful, to deliberate, as if it was meant to lure me into making a mistake. When I finally lifted the lid, I half expected another explosion, paint, glitter, or something worse. But there was no glitter, no trap. Just a single sheet of paper folded neatly inside. It was a printed notice from the HOA, an official one. The heading read, Notice of Violation and Pending Review. According to the document, I had been reported for harassment, public defamation of a board member, and unauthorized surveillance. It claimed I had violated community privacy regulations by recording a resident without consent. At the bottom, in faint, self-important script, was a signature that made my stomach turn. Karen Whitman, HOA president. The letter wasn't just petty, it was dangerous. If the board sided with her, I could be fined or even forced to remove my security cameras. The same cameras that had caught her theft in the first place. The irony stung like salt on a wound. I spent the rest of that day in quiet tension. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every car that slowed near my house made my pulse quicken. The glitter trap had exposed her. Yes, but it had also humiliated her. And Karen was not the kind of woman to forgive humiliation. Within days, the HOAS machinery began to turn against me. I started receiving daily notices, nitpicky violations that seemed almost laughable. Front hedge exceeds height limit by 2 inches, trash bins visible from curbside, decorative lighting not in compliance with community guidelines. Each notice came with the same neat signature. Karen was trying to bury me in bureaucracy. Neighbors who once smiled now avoided eye contact. Some had grown distant, likely worried about becoming her next target. Others whispered when I walked past. The tension was thick, quiet, and exhausting. It was as though the entire street had been pulled into her web of control. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not after everything she'd done. I began collecting evidence again, not just of theft, but of harassment. Copies of every notice, timestamps, photos of my yard before and after, even screenshots of her accusatory emails. My folder grew thicker by the day, a slow accumulation of proof that her vendetta wasn't just personal, it was abusive. The turning point came one windy afternoon when I found something strange near my mailbox, a torn scrap of paper with the HOA letterhead in Corinne's handwriting. It looked like part of a draft, maybe something she'd thrown away without realizing it had blown across the street. The fragment read, "Use this to push them out by the next vote." Push me out. She wasn't just trying to find me. She wanted me gone. I realized then that the glitter trap hadn't humiliated her, it had exposed her weakness. The HOA had been her power, her authority. And now that image of control was slipping. She was grasping at whatever she could to reclaim it. When the day of the review hearing came, the neighborhood gathered in the small HOA clubhouse, a beige, fluorescent lit room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and paperwork. I wasn't required to attend, but I did anyway. I wanted to see her face. Corinne arrived early, wearing her usual pastel outfit, though the faint sparkle of leftover glitter still clung to her shoes under the harsh lights. She looked calm, like someone who thought the outcome was already decided. The board members sat in their usual semicircle, their expressions tight and rehearsed. I could tell most of them didn't want to be there. The scandal had made things messy, and the HOA thrived on control, not chaos. As they reviewed the accusations, I placed a small USB drive on the table. Inside it was everything, every clip, every email, every screenshot. Proof that Corinne had stolen from me, lied, and retaliated with false reports. The silence that followed as they watched the footage was the longest 10 minutes of my life. You could have heard the air conditioning hum. When the lights came back on, no one said a word at first. Corinne's expression had hardened, her posture rigid. She knew it was over. The decision didn't come that night, but the tone had shifted. The next morning, the HOA sent a community-wide statement announcing Corinne's resignation due to personal reasons. No mention of the glitter, the theft, or the humiliation. Just a vague, sterile ending meant to save face. But the neighborhood knew the truth. Over the next few weeks, things slowly returned to normal. Packages arrived without issue. The endless stream of violations stopped. And one morning, her house went up for sale. The pristine lawn was suddenly someone else's problem. The glitter marks on her driveway were the last to fade. Even after she moved out, tiny specks would catch the sunlight when I passed by, like quiet reminders of everything that had happened. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated, even. But part of me just felt tired. The months of tension, paranoia, and neighborhood drama had left a lingering weariness. I'd learned just how fragile peace could be when someone with power and pettiness decided to abuse it. Still, the justice had been poetic. A few months later, I got an email from one of the former board members. They'd voted to introduce new rules protecting residents' right to porch cameras and delivery security measures. They called it the Glitter Clause. It made me laugh quietly, but sincerely. Life in the neighborhood became quieter, calmer, but every so often, I'd see a sparkle somewhere and expected a stray fleck of glitter in the corner of my porch, a shimmer on the curb after rain. And each time, I'd smile. Because sometimes justice doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it just glitters.